Mr. Bascom Joseph Rowlett, known to his friends as BJ, is being interviewed on January 31st, 2017, as part of the Veterans History Project, a project of the American Folklife Center of the Library of Congress. My name is Dr. Naomi Dornfeld-Platt, and I am a volunteer interviewer for this important project. Mr. Rowlett was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, and graduated from John Marshall High School, where he was a cadet in their military training regimen. Mr. Rowlett was drafted into the United States Navy in 1943 and completed his basic training in Hollywood Beach, Florida, before serving in the Pacific Theater of Operations. The formal and official surrender of Japan took place aboard the battleship USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay on September 2, 1945. Mr. Rowlett then completed his military service with a rotation in Korea and China. He attained the rank of Lieutenant JG and received, quote, a bunch of ribbons, unquote. Before being drafted, Mr. Rowlett had completed his civil engineering degree at Virginia Tech, and he later became an instructor of basic engineering. In 1948, Mr. Rowlett married Cornelia Reed, who died in 2003. Together, they had 2 sons and 5 grandchildren. His employment history is impressive. Mr. Rowlett is enthusiastically involved in his church community, and he assured me that he leads, quote, a very active life, unquote. If our country is at war, Mr. Rowlett believes in compulsory draft. If not at war, a voluntary army should suffice. Mr. Rowlett ended his initial interview by stating, "I hate war. Bad people drag good people down." Excuse me.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Sure.
Okay, please tell us when and where you were born and what your life was like in terms of family, school, employment before you were sworn into the United States Navy.
As you have mentioned, I was born in Richmond, Virginia. My father was an architect and did homes and smaller buildings there. The house that I grew up in, he designed, and I stayed there until I was 25 years old, and then I guess I went back there after my Navy experience for a short time. My new wife and I lived there for a year or two. Then we got transferred in business to Charlotte, North Carolina. I was active in sports. I'm not a great sports, don't have a lot of skills, but I'm fairly well accomplished in tennis and golf. And, I guess they would be the main two. When I went to high school, as she mentioned, it's John Marshall High School. And I was in the military at the time. They had mostly military men there. And that's where I really learned what the life is like when you fall in the military program. And then I went up to Virginia Tech. I was in my 3rd year when the draft started, and my number would have been up, but the Navy allowed me 2 6-month deferments because they wanted engineers, and I think that I would be one of the ones that would have had navigation skills and all. So I actually graduated in 1944, but I graduated early, and there was a few months lapse before I went to Hollywood Beach, Florida, where that's where I got my basic training, or I had hesitated to call it boot camp, but that's pretty much what somebody would call it.
May I just ask you to move your hat so that we could see
Sure.
your handsome face?
Oh.
Did you adapt to the vigorous training?
Oh yes. Well, see, I'd had it in high school, so it was very easy for me to make that transition. In fact, they gave us rifles and things down there to drill with, and I was one of the ones the instructor brought out to show the rest of the platoon how to handle a rifle, because I'd had it in high school and for 3 years.
And then where were you deployed?
After I was called into the service and completed that so-called boot camp, I was sent to Houston, Texas, where the Brown shipyard was building my ship, a landing ship, medium, and they used the Galveston ship canal to take the ship down and take it out and do what they call shakedown cruises.
Shakedown?
Shakedown.
What
Yeah,
is
it
that?
just means looking for bugs. So, you'd find something wrong, you'd put back into port and so on. After that, we headed down the Caribbean and went through the Panama Canal. One funny experience happened there when the war in Europe was beginning to come to a close. And one night, I was navigating the ship, and I saw two white streaking things coming at me, and I thought, oh gosh, this is Germany, they're getting ready to unload their last torpedoes. But it turned out it was porpoises. And they come up and play with the ship. And so I got down through the Panama Canal, we went up to San Diego, and we refitted there, and then headed off to Island Hop. My ship could only stay at sea so long, so it was Hawaii. Then I guess we got to Guam. Then we got to Eniwetok. And then the first action I got in was in Okinawa.
And how long were you in the Philippines and Okinawa?
Well, not the Philippines. On that first, I was in the Philippines later, but not when I went over. When we got to Eniwetok, there was a large flotilla of ships. I think we all were told to anchor in certain positions, and I think we all thought we were going into Japan. And when we got underway, we were told it wouldn't be Japan, it was going to be Okinawa. So when my ship got there, the landing ship medium is a flat-bottom ship. It's built to beach and discharge any kind of cargo you're carrying, whether it's a tank or a truck, or in my case it was some wood piling so that they could build some piers in Okinawa. But the beach had been secured when I hit the beach. It was probably 2 weeks after we had gone into Okinawa. So I stayed there, and then somewhere right in that period that you just mentioned, the war was over. But there was a point system for bringing people back home. You had to be a certain age, you had to be married, you had to have children, you had to serve in the military, so on. And I didn't qualify on any category, so I was left over there to do general duties in Korea and China for at least a year. Finally, the Navy said, we're calling everybody home, this is the last ship, and that's how I got home.
Well, describe the ship that you were on and the captain of the ship.
The ship is 210 or 15 feet long. A flat-bottom ship is no draft, so because when you beach, you got to go all the way up on the beach. So we had the stern anchor on which, when we went to the beach, we dropped the stern anchor and came into the beach, and then after you unload your cargo, you use your stern anchor and your engines to pull yourself back off the beach. We had that bow doors and the ramp that most people are familiar with, an LST. I mean, an LSM, which T meant tank and M means medium. But
What does the LS stand for?
landing ship.
Landing ship.
Mm-hmm. And we had sort of an open well on our ship. It wasn't decked over at the top, so we could go to the harbor with an older ship, excuse me, a larger ship and get cargo when it was being delivered to the people on the beach. And they were able to use cranes to lift the cargo from the big ship into the open well on my ship. And that's how a lot of stuff came in. One funny story that happened, this was after the war, but the Navy sent over a lot of beer for the soldiers and everybody. And my ship was one of the ships that went out and took those cases of beer and brought them on the beach. There was no inventory going on at that particular time. And if we had 500 cases of beer when we left the big ship, we had 490 when we hit the shore. So it took me a while to clean up my ship. And that was about the time that I was made captain of the ship, because I described the point system, and the two men that were over me both went home. And so I was promoted to Lieutenant JG and made captain of the ship at that time.
That's nice. Did you feel that the government was supportive of the troops?
Very much so. Very much so.
And how has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Well, it's a necessary evil in this world. I don't like it. I'm with Franklin D. Roosevelt, who says, I hate war. What I see going on right now is some bad people in the Middle East are doing bad things to good people. And the only way we can stop that is for good people to have to do bad things to bad people. I don't like that, but that's the way life is.
That's a very interesting way of putting it. Where were you when the war ended?
I'm sure I was in Okinawa at that time, but my next step was to go to, because I didn't come home early, my next step was to take my landing ship medium down to the Philippines, and we picked up a military government unit and brought those people back to Korea. Japan had invaded Korea, and when they surrendered, they had to leave, which left a vacuum in any kind of law enforcement. So we put military government in there. But it was a long trip down to the Philippines to get those soldiers. I think we brought about 50 and bring them back up to Korea. They, many of them got sick on that trip. I only got sick once, and that was heading over to Hawaii. I got deathly sick, but that doesn't mean you can stay in bed. You got to stand watch anyway. But after that, I kind of got sea legs. But these poor soldiers that I brought from the Philippines into Korea, they hadn't had any experience with the way our ship went up and down. It just, a flat-bottom ship is like a bathtub sitting there, and it just rides every wave up and down.
Oh my.
Sometimes you would get, you'd be down in a trough, and you'd look up, and there would be waves all around you. You couldn't see anything but the water all around you. Then all of a sudden, up you come again.
How did it stay afloat with all that water over it?
Well, there's enough draft in the ship to keep the ship, and you know, you've got fuel down there and supplies, so it's heavier in the bottom, but it is a high superstructure, you're right. And it's very much affected by the wind and the current, and the slower you're going, the more those two things come into play. I had, the good Lord gave me navigational skills, because I could handle that ship pretty well. We only had one other man on board that could really handle it, so anybody can handle it at sea, but when you came into port, you had to cut your speed way down, and once you cut the speed down, the wind blows the ship, and then the current takes the ship, and the waves bounce the ship. And you gotta know what you're doing to put it in tight places. One thing that people might not know is in Korea, the tide, at least on most of Korea, the tide drops 25 to 30 feet.
Oh my.
And so there's no way you can come up to a pier and unload anything, because you'd be just hanging there with your ropes. So they have developed over there something called tidal basins. And tidal basins would an easy way to visualize them. It's like a kid with a toy boat in a bathtub. They had gates very similar to the ones that the Panama Canal has.
Oh, the locks, yeah.
The locks, right. So you went through two gates when the tide was up, and then you were in the bathtub, or tidal basin, as it was known. And you stayed in there and did whatever duty you were supposed to do in there, and then when the tide came back up, you could get back out of the gate. But you're stuck in there for about 12 hours, whether you want to be or not.
Was knowing how to swim a requirement for being in the Navy?
Swimming or going?
Yeah.
I think you were required to take them, but I'm not sure that anybody that didn't swim, I think they took them
Not
anyway.
for recreation, I mean in an emergency, just...
Well, yeah, we were asked to carry people. I could swim, so we saw somebody in distress. We were supposed to go out and drag them to shore. And I attempted to do that, but the man they assigned to me, this was in Hollywood Beach, Florida, was much heavier than I was. He could have dragged me. I had a little trouble dragging him, but I think we both got in the Navy.
When you were in Korea, did you hear any stories of what life was like while the Japanese were there?
I really didn't, because you can't communicate with the Koreans. I mean, they've got their language and you've got yours. The Navy gave us a little booklet about this size, and it had translation words in it. So if you wanted to go to a store, you could find store and then try to use the Korean word to get you to a store or something. I got a lot of chance to go ashore because, as I pointed out, I was sitting in 12 hours in one place without moving. So we went into a place first called Incheon, and then Seoul, which you hear so much about, Seoul, Korea, is only about 20 miles, something like that, as I recall it. So I was able to get up that far, but you wouldn't go anywhere without your little booklet, because there were no translators around. You just used the book and did your best.
And when we were in China?
Well, that came after the Korean duty. I guess the Korean duty lasted about 6 months. And then I was called over to China, Shanghai, China. There was some, at that time, we were helping the Chinese nationalists. The Red Chinese were fighting the nationalists. The nationalist people are now on Formosa, but at that time they were still in the larger country of China. And one duty I had up there was apparently we had some nationalist people up the Hankow River, which went, I think it's Shanghai River. They went all the way up to Hankow. That was 300-400 miles up that river. My ship had to carry stuff up there. You got into, as we went along the shore, there was some small arms fire occasionally because the Red Chinese didn't like what we were doing. So, they kind of peppered you, but you just held your head down until you got by them. But I guess back in Korea, the worst part of the correction, in Okinawa, the best action I got in was the time of the kamikaze pilots. And they were coming over, they'd come down the beach and nobody knew they were coming, and then suddenly they were there. And fortunately, I don't think my ship was targeted because it was only 200 and some feet long. They were looking for the bigger supply ships and destroyers or whatever they could to put their planes in. And we had two 40 millimeter guns up on the bow of the ship, and we had gunmen, but those planes come over so fast and so unexpected, we shot at a lot of them. We didn't have a hit one because they were gone before we could almost take aim. It was funny.
But you saw the devastation all around you, probably.
I did see ships down. I was in a place called Busan, Korea, and one of our largest ships, either a cruiser or a battleship, was down in a place called Buckner Bay over there. It was, the bow and half of the ship was up, the stern of the ship was down. Yeah, it's you do see a lot of devastation, yes.
Do you have any flashbacks from your time in the service?
No, I really don't, because, I guess that year that I had after the war was over, I kind of settled back into a more normal life. And I haven't had any nightmares or flashbacks, and just little funny things that happened as I've described.
Did you keep in touch with any of your buddies from?
For a while, some of them wrote me and I wrote back, but then it was days before the computer. I write a lot now. I seem to be gifted with writing, so I write, but I don't think I'd do it if I had to do it longhand. I have to pretty much use the computer so I can correct things. And I write little poems and just I have a lot of fun in life now. A lot of fun.
Have you tried to publish? Make your own what?
Greeting cards. I write a greeting card and then I put a poem inside.
Oh,
and I just
nice.
tailor them for whether it's a birthday or a congratulatory something or a sympathy card. I made over 500.
Oh my goodness.
But only after the computer I was able to learn the computer.
Did you try marketing them to?
Some people have said to me, you missed your calling and all this, but I write ones that are pointed to a certain problem or person or something, and I don't write generalized, just deep sympathy to you. I tend to pick the person out and refer to events that I have some common knowledge of with the person. So, no, I don't. I don't think I want to market them. It's my hobby.
And when you were discharged, you said you adjusted quite well to civilian life, and
yeah, because I came back. We came back to California, and I think I was flown across country, and we used to train going one way, but I think I was flown across country. And that's when I returned to my home in Richmond.
But where were you discharged, in California?
California. But they don't send you out with complete discharge papers in the Navy, particularly if you're a military officer. You go into what's called the military reserves, and there are active chapters of the reserves in many places. Some of them are pay slots. Much of it's volunteer. It meant that every summer you had to give up 2 weeks to go to a special training course just so you'd stay abreast of whatever developments had taken place. And I didn't get but 2 weeks vacation in the firm I was with. And by that time I had a wife, and so I just thought, I don't want to get into the active reserves.
So you were married during the war?
No, this is after I came back.
I see.
I came back in 45. I got engaged and married in 46.
And you started to say about you got involved in something. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, I think you asked me if I made the transition well into civilian life. But when I got back, because I was an engineer, I started looking for engineering jobs. And I got on with the steel company. I started off as a draftsman with the steel company. And then I became an estimator with the steel company. Then I was moved to Charlotte to open a sales office down there with 1 or 2 other people. And then about that time, Bethlehem Steel bought the firm that I was with. It was called Virginia Steel. Bethlehem Steel bought it, lock, stock, and barrel. I moved over to Bethlehem Steel. They looked at my engineering and said, "You're a salesman, you're not an engineer." So I became a salesman, and that's really what brought me to Washington, D.C., because that subway system here, I specialize in construction sales. And that subway system here was just starting up then, so a lot of new contractors in town. We didn't have enough salesmen up here. So I was fairly successful up here. In fact, that's how I was able to retire.
How long did you work for Bethlehem Steel?
35 years.
Wow. Did you utilize the GI Bill at all?
I used it, that first place that I went in Charlotte, we lived my wife and I, in an apartment for some little period of time. The GI Bill was available to me. I used a loan to get my first house, a very small house, but you could get the house, you didn't have to put anything down. You just paid 4% interest on. So I used it there, and one other time I used it, a friend of mine's uncle ran a flying school, and I decided maybe I could be a pilot because they make more money. And so I took flying lessons for, I don't know, 4 to 6 months. I never learned I could take off a plane good, but I never learned to land one. I tended to either...
You could still be flying around.
I either brought the plane in too high when it stalls and dropped it into the pavement, or I landed with too much speed and then I bounced along the pavement. I finally decided I wasn't cut out to be a pilot, but I was on the GI Bill at that time, yes.
Did you fly for your own recreation?
Yeah, that's really what it was. Well, but not after, because I didn't really ever get the license, I had a license for someone that's in training, but I didn't get a pilot license, and thank goodness.
So when did you teach at Virginia Tech? At what point?
Well, I guess that was before I went with Virginia Steel. Virginia Tech had several associate campuses around. One I know was in Norfolk and another in Richmond. There may have been some others. And they needed engineering instructors. I was just coming back from, I guess it was almost August, September when I came back. And because I was a graduate of Virginia Tech, they asked me if I had any interest in teaching. And I'm very much interested in that, and I taught first and second engineering students, some of the basic engineering school courses, things like, engineering drafting and structural design, and calculus, and I don't know, that kind of thing, trigonometry. I did that 2 years, and then it was at that point that I went over to Virginia Steel, which became Bethlehem Steel. But I enjoyed teaching. I taught in Sunday schools in almost church I've ever been in.
Did you have to brush up on your calculus and trigonometry
Yeah,
after the war?
You just try to stay 2 pages ahead of the students.
That's a lot. 2 pages is a lot. And you mentioned your church, and what is your involvement in your church? It's a large part of your life.
Well, the earliest part of my life, my mother took me to Ginter Park Baptist Church, and when I moved to Charlotte, I went to Myers Park Baptist Church, and that's where I began to do some teaching. It was mostly in the younger grades at that time. But I was down there 14 years. They asked me if I wanted to join a board of deacons down there. The deacons this was a church of 1,600, and it was pretty much an honor to be asked to join the board of deacons, because most of the men on there had their own businesses and were quite affluent, and I was a poor little guy, just making a scratch living right then. But I went to the board of deacons there. When I went to Greensboro, I was in the First Baptist Church there. They asked me to join them, but they had some clauses in their constitution that I didn't feel like I could sign on to, so I declined. But then I came up here to Washington, and I was in the Bethesda First Baptist Church a little over 30 years, and I almost lived on the board of deacons. I often was the chairman. I was also the moderator of the Baptist Church, which is sort of the business leader. So I was heavily involved in church activity. One other thing that we did, we had an associate minister who was very interested in the homeless situation. And even in Bethesda, there are a lot of homeless people.
Oh, yeah.
And they were knocking on the door of the church, can you have some money, can I have some food? Then they go across the street and do the same thing, and then up the street and do the same thing. So there's a group called Bethesda CARES, which is very much in existence today. And our associate minister, by that time I was semi-retired, and he asked me if I wanted to be a part of it, and I did. And I served meals in the Bethesda First Baptist Church with a number of helpers. Most of them came from other churches. I should explain, Bethesda CARES became a collection of churches, and each of the churches put in $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 a year. And we had one paid worker at the time. Most of us were volunteers. But for 2 weeks out of every month, I was responsible when the meal was at our church in getting a meal on the table. The county helped us by sending little box lunches over from their cafeterias. And we generally ordered about 40 box lunches a day. But you tried to add something to it to make it interesting, a dessert or soup. And a lot of the businesses began to support us. Honey Baked Ham, for example, started to send the ends of their hams over to us. That's good for soup. It's also good for making little chopped up sandwiches. So I stayed with that program for 14 years, serving lunches, and I continued on another 8 years. On the board of, I want to say the board of deacons, but it was a board of the Bethesda CARES, governing board of Bethesda CARES. The people on there were people from some of these other churches. After that, other things came into my life and I couldn't stay with it any longer. But I'm very supportive of that program. And if you look it up on your computer now, BethesdaCares.org, you'd find quite an organization it's become. I think they had more success after I left than while I was there. I hope I didn't have anything to do with that.
Probably set it up. And what are some of your memories, good, not so good, of your military service?
I think, funny little things happen, and I think of 3 of them, if I can recall them somewhat in order. When I got into, I guess that was in China. My ship was picked as a training ship for the Chinese nationals were trying to build a little navy, nothing big, but their officers needed training in a ship. So my ship was one of the ones that was picked to do that. And I got their skipper, would-be skipper, and myself got fairly close because I saw him every day, and he showed him how the ship operates and how to maneuver it and all. So on July 4th, they asked me, I got this little note from them saying, did I want to come to a special dinner? They wanted to honor the captain of the ship. And they had picked out a restaurant, I think it was in Shanghai. And I didn't realize what was going to happen. I accepted, certainly, showed up. And here were, I guess, 8 or 10, 12 other people, Chinese people. Many of them did speak English by that time. And they would toast me, and they were pouring down sake. And, every time they stand up and toast you, you got to stand up and drink the stuff.
It's a happy party hour.
Somewhere I lost that night after a while. I can't remember everything that happened, but next day I was back on the ship. So another funny thing that happened to me while I was in China, going up that Shanghai River, there were Marines had built pontoon piers along there. They had steel pontoons to kind of float between piling. And one of the ways you had to, when you got the ship and wanted to get back in the other direction, if the river is narrow, there's a terrific current in that river. I was mentioning that tidal change in Korea, but the river, when the tide went out, the river's current was quite swift. So the only way I could get that ship turned around would be to get up a lot of speed, and then my ship had two engines and two propellers, they call them screws in the Navy, two screws, and you get up a good bit of speed, and on the starboard engine you'd say a starboard engine full, which meant full speed, and port engine back, full speed. So that kind of turned the ship around, and but if you didn't get up good speed, you only got halfway around, all of a sudden you were caught in the current. That happened to me one time, and I came down the river, and I hit one of those pontoon piers that the Marines had built, and I ripped a gap of about, I don't know, I'm going to say 4 or 5 feet in the ship. It was above the waterline, and I always laughed that my engine room could see the light of day from it. But the Navy didn't like you to rip all of that ship. Fortunately,
I don't think so.
No, we
Not a
too
good
happy
idea.
about it.
Not a good
but
idea.
fortunately there were Marines around, and they had metal plates, and so they welded up a metal plate and covered it up. But that was one funny experience. Another one while I was in China was when I first went in. This was after the war, and they were beginning to instill the old practices that had existed before the war, more formal Navy practices. I wasn't too well versed in those formal Navy practices, so I took my ship in and tied it up where it should be tied up. But I didn't know when you went to port and there was a senior officer present, SOPA, senior officer present afloat, that you were supposed to have your men in gear and topside and honor that gentleman. We didn't do that. And I went to the officers' club that night, and several of the other officers told me, "Did you hear about this ship that came in and didn't render honors to SOPA here and there?" And I'm thinking, I think that's me they're talking about. So I got called in for a little short reprimand, but that's life. They couldn't find anybody else to do what I was doing, I'm sure. So,
Otherwise, the discipline
yeah,
would
they
have
might
been
have sent
more
me home.
difficult. Wow. And what are some of the life lessons you learned from military service?
Well, I think that discipline is one of the things. I'm a fairly disciplined person, and I like that kind of a life. I don't like to. I want to, when I get up in the morning, I want to have a plan, and I want to execute the plan. Not always possible, but I think that would be the number one thing it taught me. Dress was another one. I mean, I had to be, even in the cadet corps back in Richmond, I had to wear a crease in my trousers, and we had military uniforms. Then I had military uniforms in the Navy, and of course shoes had to be shined, and a lot of that's rubbed off on me. I still like to dress well.
Your shirt and vest are very handsome
Well,
looking.
nice.
Very
I
nice.
debated about whether to put on a tie or not, but I decided against it.
And I have one more question, but before that question, tell us your stories about what happens, the reaction from other people when you wear your hat.
Oh gosh, that's a long